So welcome everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Aska Hisa, I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at ICALA, and this is our second POV tour. And POV meaning point of view, of course, and we're thrilled that we have Ignacio Perez Meruane to give us his perspectives on the work of Sandra Vásquez de la Horra. And the exhibition, The Awake Volcanoes, which is a survey of works on paper by De la Horra spanning 40 years. And in the show, you'll see the artist's exploration of such themes as the body and physical, psychological, and political landscapes. The show originated at the Denver Art Museum out of the mind and heart of curator Rafael Fonseca. And we're so happy to bring it to Los Angeles because it makes it the first time that Sandra Vásquez de la Horra has a museum show in our city. So POVs are opportunities to roam through an exhibition with an artist, and the discourse results from their choice of works, the ideas, the techniques, or whatever they want. And we'll begin with a presentation with our guest, and then we shall proceed to follow them into the gallery. So there'll be a little pause between the presentation and getting up and walking around. We've provided these souvenir handouts with the full bios. I don't tend to read the bios, but Ignacio Perez Meruane is an artist whose birth possesses multiple perspectives from birth, at birth, from before birth, like multiple perspectives, because he's someone born in Venezuela with Chilean and Palestinian roots and now lives in Los Angeles. And who better to reflect on the work of a Chilean artist who has spent most of her adult life in Berlin, Germany. So we've got globalism going on. Ignacio's work focuses on the ways in which capitalism and globalization intersect with and impress upon culture, people, and our environment. So artists don't have to be in total alignment and with the work on view, but of course Ignacio is so wonderful and visited multiple times and immersed himself in the exhibition, so we'll just see what shared interests and resonances there are, and we hope that you'll leave tonight inspired by both Ignacio Perez Meruane and Sandra Vásquez de la Horra. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm honored to do this, to present my work in the context of Sandra's work, and it's a beautiful show, and I hope I can do it justice. So I want to present primarily just this project that is from 2015, so 10 years ago now. But it seemed like the project that was most relevant that had most overlap with Sandra's work. So this is a project that was first presented in 2015 at Galería Tajamar in Santiago, Chile. And the work revolves around the historical and formal connection between the gallery space, which you'll see in a minute, the Frank Lloyd Wright designed Guggenheim Museum in New York, and Chuquicamata, which is the world's largest open pit copper mine, located in the north of Chile in the Atacama Desert. Chuquicamata means the border of the land of the Chucos, a small tribe descended from the Aymara and Quechuas. So the area was mined from as early as the 550 AD, continued to be mined during the Spanish period, but it was not until developments in extraction methods in 1899 at the Guggenheim-owned mines in Colorado that made it possible to extract ores with lower copper content, and that's how open-pit copper mining was essentially developed. So then the Guggenheims established Chilex, the Chile Exploration Company, in 1915, and the mine and the company is inaugurated at the Presidential Palace in Santiago, Chile. So although copper production in Chile was nationalized in 1917, remained nationalized during the period of dictatorship, and to this day is managed by Codelco, the National Copper Corporation of Chile. It's hard to overstate the importance of copper to Chile's economy and national identity, but also the role it played in the modernization and electrification of the world. So this is an image of sort of the archive of this project, which is housed at LACA at Los Angeles Contemporary Archive. But I wanted to show it because there's a stamp there commemorating the nationalization of copper and other interesting sort of artifacts from the project. Yeah, this is in this image, I don't know if you can make out, that writing, but it says, here at Chuquicamata lies the world's greatest single copper reserve. 35 years of mining has created this vast open pit mine, 1.5 miles long by half a mile wide and 750 feet deep. It's much, much larger now. Copper is Chile's #1 business from which it receives 70% of its US dollar income by contributing its national reserves mainly to the United States. So this is the exhibition at Galeria Tajamar, and it's a, as you can see, it's a very like particular building gallery. It's this hexagonal vitrine that's in the plaza of a residential building, and these vitrines were meant to be businesses. There's a couple of other ones which are just regular businesses, like a hairdresser. But the way that the gallery operated was very interesting in that the viewer never enters the space, but just walks around it as a circulates around it, so to speak. So it had this really interesting tension and relationship between the interior and exterior of the space. So the central element of the space of the installation, as you can see, is the spiral shelving unit that is installed against the glass of the building, on which a variety of objects are placed relating to both the mine and the museum. And the pitch of the ramp is the same as the Guggenheim Museum's, which is a 3-degree tilt. So there's copper pipes, postcards of the mine and the museum, hand-hammered copper bowls, and glass panes with ground verdigris, which is a pigment that's derived from the oxidation of copper. And the lamps provide the sole illumination for the show, and you could see the wires sort of also traversing the space. Sorry, I meant to say about the lamps in particular are designed with thinking about Frank Lloyd Wright's theories of organic architecture, which I'll speak more about a little bit later. And so the hand-hammered copper bowls were filled with acetic acid and left to evaporate and created these sort of spiral concentric circles in the bowls. So after the exhibition, I went and visited the mine and took these photographs. And it's hard to describe the experience of being there in person. Obviously, like the idea of the sublime comes up. It's obviously overwhelming. It's gigantic. I think I have it in my notes here somewhere, but at that time, the mine was measured 1 kilometer deep, 3 kilometers wide, and 5 kilometers long. And this is the town of Chuquicamata, which was established as a company town in the time of when the mine was owned by the Guggenheims. And then it was sold off to another company named Anaconda. The theater on that you see on the right is a replica of a theater in the United States, and and a lot of the buildings and furniture are made from Oregon pine. But what's interesting is that the town was evacuated in 2007. This is from the USGS website, which says besides health and safety concerns, the company was running out of running out of convenient places to pile up mine waste. To extract 1 kilogram of copper, 100 kilograms of rock has to be removed from the ground. That waste material has to go somewhere. So now the site of the former town is beginning to be buried in mine waste. This waste is called either tailings or overburden. So that entire mountain that you see in the background is just all waste from the mining. This is the former miner unions building. So yeah, a lot of this project has to do with something that I didn't really have the language for at the time, but I found laid out pretty plainly in this idea of world systems theory, which is the perspective that posits that periphery countries are exploited by core countries, the dominant, wealthy, and industrialized parts of the world, are exploited for resources and cheap labor. The town of Chuquicamata and its fate exemplifies the periphery, where the theories of organic architecture do not apply. These are images from the publication that I made later, which are documents that both the exhibition, but also images from that I took while visiting the mine. And it's titled "A Curving Wave That Never Breaks," which is a phrase that Frank Lloyd Wright used to describe the Guggenheim Museum, but that I associated more with the overwhelming sublime feeling of both the mine, but also thinking about the global system in which copper circulates as a commodity, but also makes the circulation of information possible. So yeah, as you could see here an image of one of the lamps, and as I had mentioned, they were sort of made thinking about these theories of organic architecture, and some of these elements that he describes are that organic architecture should strive for simplicity and repose, minimize rooms, integrate openings, eliminate details. Organic architecture should utilize the deeper rational structure of nature or the logic of organic growth. Rather than mimic nature, architecture and design should use the logic of nature as a geometric armature. Many of Frank Lloyd Wright's designs make extensive use of modules as a building unit, acting as an architectural equivalent of cells in nature. This use of modules would also allow him to restate the larger geometric motif of a building in the smallest possible detail. In the case of the Guggenheim Museum and other designs utilizing spirals, it was important to write that it was a shape found in celestial nebulae, seashells, tornadoes, whirlpool forms that range in scale from the microscopic to the galactic, each its own manifestation of nature's mysterious forces. That buildings should grow from their site is another sort of element or of organic architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright's own dwelling in Arizona, Taliesin, is a geometric extrapolation of the surrounding mountains, built largely from stones from the site, inserted into rudimentary wooden forms and filled with concrete. So yeah, here's another image of the publication. This is a more like a special edition that the booklet is on the left, and this box set was released with Culpa Press, which included a copper bowl and these postcards printed with the verdigris pigment, which was hand harvested by myself from, as you'll see in a minute. This is like a secondary exhibition that happened at LACA, which coincided with the book release, that included these large spun copper bowls. On the left, you can see a watercolor of the mine that was made with the verdigris pigment, and a vitrine on the right, which is a kind of machine to harvest this pigment. So in the vitrine are the scraps or the waste material from making the copper bowls, and these are exposed to the acetic acid vapors that then create this green crust on the copper plates that can be scraped off and ground into a pigment. Here's like a more refined version of that same vitrine idea that was used for another project that focuses more on the copper objects in the Pre-Columbian Museum in Santiago. And so yeah, that's pretty much the presentation on my work. But this is a small drawing I made, watercolor with the pigment. I made a few paintings as part of the series of work, but I thought it was a good segue between my work and Sandra's work. And because what I wanted to point out was in that in making these paintings, it really, as you can see, my practice is more geared towards installation and sculptural work. But what making these paintings kind of taught me was that like painting is really just the moving and spreading of matter that actually comes from a place, and that then you suspend in a medium and you like spread it across a page or a canvas. Again, this is maybe an idea that's obvious to painters, the people that make paintings habitually, but to me it was like a revelation of sorts that painting is material in nature, and which I think we'll talk about more in Sandra's show. This is one of the elements that really stood out to me about her. Okay, hi. So we're here at Sandra Vásquez de la Hora's show at the ICALA, the Awake Volcanoes, and I'm excited to do a point of view walkthrough of the show. I wanted to focus on, there's a couple of like clusters of work that I wanted to focus on. And the first one would be over here actually, which is kind of how I first saw the exhibition, or this is the first work that I saw. So I kind of wanted to touch on the fact that this is the area where there's the most sort of text-heavy part of the show, where she incorporates a lot of text lettering, but it's also the most sort of like politically charged part of the show. And like in that piece over there, you can see it says, El pueblo unido jamás será vencido, which translates to English, you've maybe heard the phrase, the people united will never be defeated. But it's a phrase that is very closely associated with the Unidad Popular, which was a coalition of leftist parties established in 1969, but throughout Salvador Allende's democratically elected socialist government, and all the things that brings to mind for me. This is like my parents' generation sort of era, but what it kind of brings to mind is it's also the title of a folk song from that era, and associated with the Nueva Canción movement, which is the new song movement, which was popular all over South America, but particularly big in Chile. And some of the artists that you would probably be most familiar with from that movement are Víctor Jara, Violeta Parra, and there's something about that moment of like folk and singer-songwriting Again, the words are very important, and I kind of relate it to this tradition of like this literary tradition in Chile that's a lot more developed, you could say, than the like visual arts, so to speak. So there's all the, of course, you can think of like Pablo Neruda, Gabriela Mistral, Nicanor Parra, Isabel Allende, and Roberto Bolaño. So all these writers that are like, it seems to me like there's something about Chilean art that is more about words or something like that. And so she's engaging, to me, that's kind of what comes up when I look at this work, the way that she engages with language. And to me, it's a little bit, again, romantic, sort of, and I mean that in a good way. Like it kind of, it's nostalgic to me or something like that, as a Chilean living abroad. And so this like political element in her work is only as you'll see in the rest of the exhibition, it's only one kind of, the work and the exhibition itself to me feels so, like I've said to some other people, it feels so generous, and in both like the how prolific she is as an artist, but also in the subject matter, that it's so that includes so many things. There's a couple of quotes or poems that I want to read. One of them that came to mind when I was looking at, again, this particular portion of the show in relation to the rest of it, which you'll see later, brought to mind a poem by a poem by Marwan Makul, which you might have heard recently in the past couple of years. He's a Palestinian poet, and it goes, in order for me to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds. And in order to listen to the birds, the warplanes must be silent. And I think the reason I thought of that poem is because I really appreciate the way that she's able to include sort of, you could say, like both the warplanes and the birds in her work. Whereas as an artist, sometimes I feel like I can only sort of focus on the one. It's really beautiful, I think, how she's able to be inclusive and sort of do it all, sort of. And so then I wanted to kind of move on to these more sculptural elements or parts of the show that are like obviously the most formally like interesting or particular to her work. It seems like a formal aspect that she's developed, and obviously like I kind of gravitated towards them based on these kind of like striations or layering that is visible in the drawings, that obviously to me bring up like thinking of geology or that kind of geological time. But there's also something that it brought up to me that that I hope that you can see when you see the show, but also even all the flat work is coated in beeswax, and it kind of lends this like really this physicality to the work that is obviously present in the more sculptural ones and in the boxes and houses, and then the folded paper works, which kind of made me think of. I don't know if this is particular to Chile or all of like the Spanish-speaking world, but when you think of or talk about art, you don't necessarily talk about visual art, but you talk about the artes plásticas, so the plastic arts, meaning like anything that can be like, plasticity and molded, manipulated, formed. And so there's that kind of element that in the work that I also really appreciate, that the work is has this physicality to it.
Ignacio, how familiar were you of Sandra's work before?
Not very familiar. I knew her name, I knew some of it, but yeah, I'm so happy to get to know it. I mean, I'm so happy that an artist from Chile of her generation is getting like her flowers, so to speak. And finally, I kind of wanted to move to the back corner here, which are these kind of beautiful little drawings that can kind of get lost, especially because there's this element of scale with all the other work, that there's some work that is so kind of monumental. All these drawings over here, first of all, they're very intimate, and they kind of drew me in, like really drew me in, was these kind of very elegant numbers and lettering that sort of clearly suggest this language of anatomical or botanical illustrations that suggest this sort of objective scientific language that I think is really interesting, how she kind of like turns that on end. When you kind of look at them more closely, they're kind of like corrupted or perverted, or they're like mixed together with like their vegetal, humanoid, sexual organs. They're all kind of mixed together, which I thought was a really, really kind of interesting like summation of her practice, sort of in general. It's like a condensed version of everything that she's doing. It brought to mind again this other like philosophy that I've kind of recently become acquainted with, which is, so that I don't know a whole lot about, I can't go too in depth into it, but that I recently took a workshop with this, her name is Henrique, I have it written here, but Henrique Holdriger from the Nature Institute, and they focus on Goethean science, the German, like as in the German author and poet Goethe. And anyway, I'll just read a quote from one of the writers from that workshop. But as soon as we attempt to grasp living organisms scientifically, we must take them apart, and this taking apart nets us a multitude of isolated facts which offer no direct clue to that which we experience directly in the living organisms. We have no way of making the nature and behavior of an organism scientifically intelligible other than by its construction out of facts obtained in this way. We thus face the basic problem of all biology, possibly of all knowledge. The question can be formulated quite simply: what do the phenomena arising from the isolated procedure teach us about the essence, the intrinsic nature of an organism? How, from such phenomenon, do we come to an understanding of the behavior of the individual? Holistic and organismic understanding of life, which simply means good, contextually sensitive understanding, is a qualitatively different kind of knowledge than what we practice in reducing and focusing. So that's kind of what came to mind when I was looking at this work, whereas again, a more straightforward, scientific, botanical or anatomical illustration would be this reducing and focusing. It seems like what she's doing is kind of seeing and pointing out all of these connections in the human natural world. And of course, I was very much drawn to the spiral in the which is again anatomically correct, but when you kind of look at it decontextualized, it can start to become abstract and reference all these other kinds of life forms. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like something that I was noticing in your presentation that kind of grounded us into this tour was this kind of absence of a presence through like history of, I think like that, I forgot what this space was called, that big like canyon thing.
The mine?
Yeah, the mine, yeah. And the images that you showed felt very like ghostly, but you could sort of sense that like there was a like physical presence of laborers, et cetera here. And then I think in this show, there's a lot of, I mean, besides like literal presences of bodies, but there's a lot of like depictions of like the essence of presence through these like ears or these other organs and everything. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on like the significance of that sort of like ghostly or like alluding to presence, and how maybe that like connects with your work or the history that you research for your work and this show.
Yeah, I think a lot of that can be kind of, again, summarized by that poem that I referenced earlier, that it's like, I feel like, obviously we kind of all share a similar interest or like, my focus is on the human or the human experience, but it tends to stay focused on like these giant forces that seem to define all like our lives, whether you want them to or not, that have such a grand effect on us, whether you notice them or not. And that's what I mean, that like maybe I kind of get stuck on that first step of the focusing on the war planes, and she's able to touch on that, and then also kind of reach this level that is that's why I find the work really inspiring, and beautiful that she's able to do those things. But yeah, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your illuminating talk, and I really love the kind of artis plasticus point that you made, and yeah, because the drawings do feel so physical, and like especially like the more you look at them, the more like even that drawing there, how you see like how worked that kind of graphite flower is. But I actually had a question about I was thinking about your relationship to the landscape and the landscape in Chile, and then like all of the volcanoes I'm noticing. I was very curious about like, the relationship to volcanoes in this work, or just kind of curious, like, volcanoes, I don't see that in drawings a lot.
Yeah. I mean, to my understanding, it's very important to Sandra's work. She's, I believe, from the south of Chile, and where volcanoes have this very folk mythological significance. Again, that's very specific to the south of Chile. Chile is very like defined by these regions, these like temperate regions, sort of. So again, the majority of my focus was like in the north of Chile, which is very similar. Like the Atacama Desert is the most arid desert in the world. Very similar to Death Valley, sort of, is what you could imagine. it's Chile is very, very similar to California in a lot of ways.
So I'm also Palestinian, and the poem that you wrote really resonated with me, and what you were just sharing about relating the body to land and like the anatomical nature of it was, and the way that we can think about plants in their essence, in their relationship with existence. When I've only really thought about the relationship between essence preceding existence or existence preceding essence in relation to the body, but that connection that you were drawing to land made me wonder whose bodies are allowed to be bodies without organs, whose bodies are allowed to create their own essence for themselves, and how is that relating to world systems theories, which I haven't heard about, but now I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I think it's considered somewhat of an antiquated sort of theory. I think it's where like the term like the third world comes from when you think of, and those would be the regions of the third world. So it doesn't necessarily mean underdeveloped, but it means like these are the periphery, you know. But yeah, I think that kind of relates to this idea that I was talking about, where it's like I love for example, the idea of organic architecture, that a dwelling should be integrated with its environment, should reflect its environment, should be beautiful to live in, should be made with natural materials, and all of these ideas. But yeah, they just seem to not apply to the periphery. Again, the places where that make this patronage of this kind of organic architecture possible in the first place. Yeah, so I don't know. I would say that politically, yeah, the people in the periphery are not allowed to access that kind of essence.
Do you think that like art making is a way to access the essence, maybe, for you?
I do, and I think that my approach to art making has changed over the years. Again, that project that I introduced is from 10 years ago, and I think it comes from a very different place, and much more critical and much more, again, focused on this political, like the political realities of the world, basically. And there's something about the way I'm thinking about art making now that is more focused on that, accessing that essence.
I had to just look this up in my phone. It's a coincidence you're Venezuelan. There was a Guggenheim exhibition on, is it a Gagel?
Yeah.
A few years ago when I lived in New York. That was great.
Yeah.
And Cecilia Vicuña, was she Chilean or?
She's Chilean, yeah.
Chile. I thought there was another Guggenheim exhibit on the upper floor.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting you mentioned the 3-degree in that vitrine. Incline that's paralleled. Mm-hmm. Did you get to see the Vicuña, the Paulo Bramos, and the Gego in the Guggenheim?
I saw the Gego show, but not the Cecilia Vicuña show. I saw it somewhere else, I believe, when it was traveling.
Do you have any thoughts about that? Maybe how she uses text differently from, I know we saw you illuminating the notion, the placement of text, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. Again, I'm glad that all of these artists are kind of getting their due, sort of, from a kind of generation and a place. There's definitely some similarities between Cecilia Vicuña's work and Sandra's. I think she's mentioned it as being influential. I'm trying to think. I mean, I have this beautiful poster that I bought that Cecilia Vicuña made as a fundraiser for Palestine recently. That says it's a text-based work that says Sol y Dad, which is basically a splitting up of solidarity, but into the words like son and to give. And anyway, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But but it is also this kind of like more generous, similar to Sandra's work, where it's like she's able to be political in this kind of very generous and generative way.
I I have one more question. I keep looking at the sculptural drawings, and I forget what this type of map is called, or like this representation of a map where you see all the lines of the different like heights on a map. Yes, topographical. So I feel like I see that a lot in these sculptural accordion works. But then there's this sort of conflicting moment when I'm looking at it. It also seems like it's not that, but rather it's like following this like curve of the body to these different points in the body. And so I'm wondering if maybe you had some thoughts on like, unless like you 100% know like of Sandra's intention with it, but yeah, wondering like what you feel the intention in like adding those lines and making them very visible into these drawings, like the purpose of it, or if it alludes to that topographical drawing as opposed to like the curve of the body, that sort of like blending of it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I can't know exactly what Sandra's intention is, but the way I read the work is that it is this melding of not necessarily a topographical map, but as I mentioned, I view it almost more of this like striation, this like layer cake of so more like geological, whereas topographical maps I think just show like sort of elevation and sorts. This kind of layering of material that can show again time. And I think about that a lot of, obviously you could see some of that in my work, but it also, I kind of think about it as like a way of structuring the work, the way that the themes kind of layer. But I thought it was really interesting, like I had a moment where looking at the work where like these folded paperworks have that kind of rendering or like representation of line and striation. There's a work over there that's also maybe it's a little too far away to look at, but that has the face on the torso, but like the rest of the body is rendered in a similar way, but it kind of feels like it's referring more to, again, maybe in this like anatomical illustration way, it looks like it's more referring to like the muscle fibers, which is, but it's rendered in a similar like linear way. So I don't know. Again, I kind of had this like moment looking back and forth at that work and this work, how formally they're kind of similar, but they're referring to these different things.
All right, well, that was really a wonderful journey through this show with you. And thanks for all your questions. And I think we have some time if you'd like to just take in the show. And Ignacio, if you hang out, we can chat more.
Sure.
But yeah. I know that people have not seen the show, so they can take it in and we can all just hang for a bit. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.